Chapter 1, Meeting by Accident. The art exhibition hall was really crowded. There were people everywhere talking and making sounds of liking the art. Emily walked slowly through the big group of people. Her eyes were shining bright as she looked carefully at all the wonderful art on the walls. She had a big dream of becoming a famous and great artist one day. She wore a simple but nice dress that had flowers on it. Her long hair was flowing freely over her shoulders. She stopped in front of a very strange and interesting abstract painting. She was so lost in thought, trying really hard to understand the feelings and ideas that the artist had put on the canvas. At the same time, Jacob came into the hall. He walked with big and confident steps. He wore a very nice suit and looked like a person who was very successful. He was there to meet new people and maybe find a piece of art that would look good in the fancy decoration of his office. When Emily moved to see the next art piece, she didn't notice Jacob coming from the opposite direction. They hit each other by mistake. Emily's sketchbook and purse fell to the floor with a thump. Jacob's papers flew everywhere like little birds. "I'm so sorry!" they both shouted at the same time. Their voices mixed together in the noisy hall. Their eyes met, and for a short moment, it felt like everything around them stopped. Emily was really impressed by the way Jacob looked at her. His deep blue eyes had a mix of surprise and interest in them. Jacob, on the other hand, thought Emily was so charming with her big and innocent eyes and the red color of embarrassment on her cheeks. "Let me help you," Jacob said quickly. He bent down right away to pick up the things that had fallen on the floor. "Thank you," Emily said. Her voice was soft and a little shaky. It was like she was still a little shocked by what had happened. When they stood up and were still holding each other's things, they both felt something special. It was like an invisible line was pulling them together. "I'm Jacob," he said, and reached out his hand to shake hers. "Emily," she replied and put her hand in his. The moment their hands touched, she felt a little shiver go down her back. "Are you an artist?" Jacob asked when he saw the sketchbook in his hand. There were some drawings peeking out from the sides. "Just trying to be," Emily answered with a shy smile. Her eyes looked down for a moment. "Well, I have a strong feeling you will be a really great one," Jacob said. His words were full of honesty and made Emily feel good inside. They spent the next few minutes talking about the exhibition. They shared what they liked and didn't like about the different art pieces. Before they knew it, they were having a long and nice conversation as if they were old friends who knew each other for a long time. Little did they know that this accident of bumping into each other would be the beginning of a beautiful and sweet love story. Chapter 2. The Spark Ignites. After that special meeting at the art exhibition, Jacob just couldn't stop thinking about Emily. Her big smile, the way her eyes sparkled, and how much she loved art, all of it stayed deep in his heart. Days went by and he finally got the courage to do something. A few days passed and Jacob really wanted to talk to Emily again. He looked everywhere for the business card she had given him and then dialed her number. His heart was beating so fast like a drum as the phone rang. He was so worried that she might be busy or not want to talk to him. But when he heard her voice on the other end, he felt a big wave of relief. It was like a weight lifted off his chest. "Emily, it's Jacob. I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said, but he sounded really nervous. He tried to act calm, but it was easy to tell he was excited. "Not at all, Jacob. It's nice to hear from you," Emily replied. Her voice was full of warmth and it made Jacob feel happy right away. They spent a long time on the phone that day. They talked and talked for hours. They shared stories about when they were little kids, the things they liked to do for fun, and the big dreams they had for the future. The conversation was so easy and smooth. It was like they could talk forever and never get tired. And with every minute that passed, the feeling between them got stronger and stronger. Jacob decided he wanted to see her in person and not just talk on the phone. So he asked her to go have coffee with him. Emily was really excited at the thought of seeing him again, and she said yes right away. The day of their coffee date came. Jacob got to the cafe way before the time they were supposed to meet. He was so nervous that he kept moving his watch around on his wrist. Then Emily walked in. She looked even more beautiful than he remembered. Her hair was tied up in a loose bun that made her look really elegant. And she wore a simple white dress that showed how graceful she was. They sat at a table in the corner. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the whole place. Their eyes met, and they both had big smiles on their faces. The talk was light and happy. They talked about art and how some paintings made them feel. They talked about movies they loved and the music that made them dance. They found out they had so many things in common. As the sun started to go down and the cafe was filled with a golden light, Jacob knew this was just the beginning of something great. Emily felt the same way. That little spark that had started when they first met was now a big fire burning bright inside them. And they both knew that something really special was starting to happen. They left the cafe, but they didn't want to say goodbye. Jacob walked Emily all the way to her doorstep. Before he left, he took her hand and looked into her eyes. "I can't wait to see you again, Emily," he said. His voice was soft but full of hope. "I feel the same, Jacob," she replied. Her heart was beating so fast, like a bird trying to fly out of her chest. And with that, they said goodbye and went their separate ways. But they both couldn't wait to see what would happen next in this new and wonderful love story that was just starting to grow. Chapter 3: Shared Dreams. After their coffee date, Jacob and Emily became inseparable. They used every bit of their free time to explore the city. They would walk down little-known alleys to discover hidden cafes or visit secret gardens that only the locals knew about. They also went to art shows, standing in front of paintings and sculptures, sharing their thoughts and feelings. And they had many intimate meals together, talking and laughing over delicious food. One sunny afternoon, they found a quiet park that seemed like a peaceful haven away from the busy city. They spread a blanket under the shade of a large oak tree that had been there for years. The gentle breeze blew, carrying the sweet scent of blooming flowers. It was as if the whole world had slowed down just for them. "Jacob, I have this big dream of having my own art gallery one day," Emily confided. Her eyes looked up at the clear blue sky, filled with hope and longing. "That's an amazing dream, Emily. I have no doubt in my mind that you'll make it happen," You have so much talent and passion, Jacob replied. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze, showing his support. Then Jacob started to talk about his own dreams. I want to expand my business all over the world, not just for the money, but to make a real positive difference in people's lives, he said. Emily listened closely, her heart swelling with pride for him. I want to travel the world and see different places. I want to draw inspiration from different cultures and put it into my art, Emily continued. Her voice was soft but full of excitement. Well, then we'll make it happen together. I'll be by your side every step of the way. No matter what challenges come, we'll face them together, Jacob promised. His eyes were full of determination. As they talked, they imagined a future that was full of adventure and creativity. They talked about buying a small cottage by the sea. It would have a big window in Emily's studio so she could look out at the ocean while she painted. Jacob could work remotely, looking out at the same beautiful view. That evening they visited Emily's art studio. The walls were covered with her unfinished works. There were paintings of cityscapes, portraits of people she knew, and abstract pieces that came from her deepest thoughts. Each one told a story, a part of her journey as an artist. Jacob was completely in awe of her talent and the dedication she put into her work. Your art is not just beautiful, Emily. It has soul. It makes me feel things I can't even explain, he said. He looked at her with admiration, his eyes shining. Emily blushed at his praise. Thank you, Jacob. It means the world to me that you understand. Your support means everything, she said. Later, Jacob took Emily to his office. It was a modern space with big windows and a view of the city. He showed her the plans for his upcoming business ventures. She looked at them carefully and offered her insights and suggestions. Jacob listened and valued her perspective. Their shared dreams became the foundation of their relationship. They made it stronger and more solid. They knew that together, with hard work and love, they could turn those dreams into reality. As the stars came out one by one and the night grew darker, they held each other close. They could feel the warmth of each other's bodies and the beating of each other's hearts. They knew that their journey together had just begun, and there were many wonderful things waiting for them in the future. Chapter 4: Stormy Days. Weeks passed by really fast, and Emily and Jacob had so many happy times and shared lots of great experiences together. But just like in any story, there were some troubles coming their way. Emily had been working super hard on her new collection of paintings for an important exhibition. She put all of her heart and soul into every single stroke of the brush. She really hoped that this would be the big moment when she became really famous in the art world. When the opening night of the exhibition finally arrived, she was excited at the beginning, but the number of people who came was really disappointing. There were only a few critics there, and they said some really bad things about her work. They said it was just copied from others and there was no new idea in it. Emily's heart felt really heavy when she heard those mean words, and all her confidence just broke into pieces. Jacob, who could see how sad she was, tried his best to make her feel better. He said, "This is just one bad thing that happened, Emily. You have so much talent, and sooner or later, everyone will notice it." But his words didn't seem to get into Emily's ears. She just went into a shell of not believing in herself anymore. Back at her studio, Emily just stared at her unfinished paintings. Tears were running down her face non-stop. She started to ask herself if she was really good enough to have a career as an artist. Jacob came to visit her every single day. He brought her beautiful flowers and said encouraging words, but the pain of failing was too deep inside her. At the same time, Jacob's business was also having a bunch of problems. A big competitor of his launched a similar product but at a much lower price. This made the sales of his company go down a lot. He had to spend long hours at the office trying to think of a good plan to deal with this situation. The stress from all of this work and Emily's sadness really made their relationship not as good as before. They started to have arguments more and more often. One evening, after a really big and angry fight, Emily ran out of Jacob's apartment. Outside, it was raining really hard. Emily was walking on the empty streets all by herself. She felt so lost and alone. Jacob, on the other hand, was sitting in his apartment, looking at the place where Emily had been before. He realized that they needed to find a way to get through these hard times together. Otherwise, they might lose all the good things they had built. Chapter 5: Standing Strong Together. The days after their big argument were not at all good for Emily and Jacob. There was a lot of silence and stress between them. Emily spent most of her time all by herself in her studio. She was lost in her own thoughts and had a lot of self-doubt. She kept thinking about how her exhibition had gone so wrong and how she might not be a good artist after all. Meanwhile, Jacob was buried under a huge pile of work. His business was in trouble and he needed to save it. Every day he was in his office from early morning till late at night, trying to find ways to make things better. One evening, Jacob was sitting at his desk in his office. He was so exhausted and stressed out. He looked at a photo of him and Emily that was on his desk. All the memories of the happy times they had spent together came flooding back to him. He suddenly realized that he couldn't just let their relationship fall apart like this. He decided to stop working for a while and go and see Emily. When he reached her studio, the door was half open. He peeked inside and saw Emily sitting in the corner. There were unfinished paintings all around her and she looked really defeated. Without saying a word, Jacob walked over to her. He gently put his arms around her and held her tight. "Emily, I'm sorry. We can get through this together," he said in a soft voice. Emily looked up at him. Her eyes were red and swollen from all the crying she had done. "I'm sorry too, Jacob. I've been so wrapped up in my own failure that I pushed you away." "I shouldn't have done that," she said, her voice shaking. They held each other for a really long time. They both felt how much they needed each other. After that, Jacob started to spend more time with Emily at the studio. "I think this part of the painting could use a brighter color," he would say, giving his honest opinions on her work. And he would also tell her, "You have such a unique style, Emily. Don't let what those critics said bring you down." His words helped Emily start to see the beauty in her paintings that she had missed before. In return, Emily used her creativity to help Jacob's business. "Why don't we make some ads that show the story behind your products?" she suggested. And she spent hours designing promotional materials that really captured the essence of Jacob's brand. Slowly but surely, things started to get better. Emily's confidence came back as she finished her paintings for a new exhibition. People who saw her work this time were really impressed and gave her a lot of praise. And Jacob's business began to recover too. His new marketing strategy attracted more and more customers. Through all these challenges, they learned to rely on each other's strengths. Jacob would tell Emily, "You're my inspiration to keep going." And Emily would say, "Your support means everything to me." Their love grew stronger as they faced the storm together. They became more united and determined than ever before. As the days passed, they knew that no matter what hard things life threw at them in the future, as long as they had each other, they could overcome any problem. Chapter 6: Romantic Getaway. When their lives were slowly getting better and more normal, Jacob decided that he and Emily really needed a break, so he planned a big surprise. He was going to take Emily on a romantic getaway to a beach place that was far away and quiet. One morning, Emily opened her eyes and was very surprised to see Jacob standing next to her bed. He had 2 big suitcases and a smile on his face that looked a little sneaky. "Pack your bags, love. We're going on an adventure," Jacob said happily. Emily's face became bright with excitement. She quickly started putting some important things into her suitcase. She was really curious and couldn't wait to find out where they were going. After a few hours of traveling by plane or car, they finally arrived at a beautiful beach resort. The sound of the big waves crashing on the shore, the warm sand under their feet, and the gentle sea breeze blowing made them feel very welcome and happy. During the days they were there, they spent a lot of time lying on the beach, enjoying the sun and getting a nice tan. They also took long walks along the shore, feeling the water touch their feet. In the evenings, they had dinner under the stars. They ate delicious food that was from that place and shared stories and laughed a lot. One night, as they were lying on a blanket on the beach, looking up at the sky full of stars, Jacob took Emily's hand. "Emily, these past few months that I've spent with you have been the best times of my life. You make everything around me more beautiful and better," he said with love in his voice. Emily turned to look at him. Her eyes were full of love. "You're my whole world, Jacob," she said. In that moment, surrounded by the beautiful nature and the deep love they had for each other, Jacob moved closer and kissed Emily very gently and sweetly. The next day, they went on a boat ride to a small island near the resort. The water was a clear blue color, and the colorful coral reefs below the water were an amazing sight to see. As they snorkeled together, holding each other's hands, they felt like they were in a world that belonged only to them. This romantic getaway wasn't just a normal vacation. It was a way for them to show again how much they loved each other and that they wanted to be together always. When it was time to go back home, they both knew that this trip would always have a very special place in their hearts. It would be a memory that they would keep and think about for their whole lives. Chapter 7: The Distance Looms. After returning from their amazing and peaceful getaway, Emily and Jacob got back to their usual daily routine. But they had no idea that a big challenge was about to come into their lives. One sunny morning, Jacob was having his coffee when his phone rang. It was a call that would completely change the course of their lives. It was an offer from a very well-known and respected international firm. This was an opportunity that was just too good to turn down. However, it meant that he would have to move to a different country for a long period of time. That evening, when Jacob sat down with Emily to share the news, her heart dropped like a stone. They sat on the couch and a heavy silence filled the room. Their minds were racing as they both thought hard about what this decision could mean for their relationship. "I don't know what to do, Emily. This could be the chance to really make my career. But the thought of losing you because of it terrifies me," Jacob said. His voice was shaky and filled with doubt and confusion. Emily took a deep breath, trying her best to be strong and hold back the tears that were threatening to spill over. "I want you to take this amazing chance, Jacob. I know how important it is for you. But I have to admit, I'm really scared of the distance. I'm scared of how it might change us," she said, her voice cracking a little. They spent the next few days having long and serious talks. They discussed all the possible options they had. They weighed the good things and the bad things about Jacob accepting the offer. In the end, Jacob decided that he couldn't let this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity pass him by. He promised Emily that no matter how far apart they were, they would find a way to make their relationship work. The days before Jacob's departure were a mix of happy memories and sad goodbyes. They spent every moment they could together. They went for walks in the park, had romantic dinners at home, and just lay in each other's arms talking about their future. They made as many memories as they could and vowed to stay strong and true to each other no matter what. On the day of his departure, Emily went with Jacob to the airport. Her eyes were red from crying the night before. As they stood there, she hugged Jacob as tightly as she could. It was like she never wanted to let him go. "I'll miss you every single day," she whispered into his ear, her voice filled with sadness. "I'll be back before you even notice I'm gone," Jacob replied, trying to sound positive. He kissed her forehead gently, hoping to give her some comfort. As Jacob's plane took off into the sky, Emily stood there watching until it was just a tiny dot. A huge sense of emptiness filled her heart. The distance between them was now not just the miles between two countries. It was a big test of their love and their commitment to each other. Chapter 8: Long-Distance Struggles. The weeks that followed Jacob's departure were a real struggle for both Emily and him. The time difference between their locations and their busy schedules made communication a major challenge. It was like they were constantly playing a game of catch-up and often losing. Video calls, which were supposed to be their lifeline, frequently got interrupted in the middle. Maybe it was a bad internet connection, or one of them had to rush off to a meeting or an appointment. And text messages sometimes went unanswered for hours, leaving the other person waiting and worrying. Emily found herself alone in the city that they used to share together. Everywhere she went, there were memories of Jacob. She would walk into their favorite coffee shop and sit at the table where they used to have deep conversations and share dreams. The smell of the coffee and the familiar surroundings only made her miss him more. Nights were the absolute hardest. When she lay in her bed alone in the darkness, she would long for the warmth of his embrace, the sound of his breathing next to her. Meanwhile, Jacob was in a whole new world, trying to adjust to his demanding new job and the strange and unfamiliar environment. The stress of having to prove himself at work, combined with the ache of being so far away from Emily, took a heavy toll on him. He would often find himself in the middle of a busy workday, suddenly lost in thoughts of home, of the familiar streets and the smile of the woman he loved. One particularly rough day at work, Jacob had a major setback. He needed Emily's comforting words more than ever, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't reach her. The frustration of not being able to share his pain with the one person who understood him best overwhelmed him. Doubts started to creep into his mind, and he began to question if they could really make this long-distance relationship work. Back in their home city, Emily was dealing with her own share of problems. She had put a lot of hope and effort into an art fair, but things didn't go as planned. Instead of having Jacob by her side to hold her hand and tell her it would be okay, she was left to face the disappointment all alone. It felt like the world was against her. During one of their rare video calls, which they both looked forward to with anticipation and hope, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Small misunderstandings, which would have been easily sorted out if they were together in person, blew up into big arguments. Words were said in the heat of the moment that they didn't really mean. And in the end, they both hung up the call, feeling hurt, confused, and more alone than ever. "I don't know how much longer we can keep doing this," Emily said to herself as tears streamed down her face. The pain in her heart was almost too much to bear. Jacob, too, was at his wits' end. He felt like the distance was slowly but surely driving a wedge between them, pushing them apart. But deep down in his heart, he knew that their love was something special, something worth fighting for. Chapter 9. Doubts and Fears. As the months passed by and the long-distance situation continued, doubts and fears started to sneak into the hearts of Emily and Jacob. Emily would find herself constantly looking at the lives of other couples around her. She would see them sharing simple things like having breakfast together or going for walks hand in hand. The loneliness she felt deep inside made her question if her love for Jacob was powerful enough to handle this long separation. Jacob, on the other hand, was having a hard time fitting in with the new people at his work. He missed the comfort and understanding that only Emily's presence could give him. He often thought about the dreams they used to talk about, the future they planned together, the high pressure of his new job, and the fact that Emily was so far away made him wonder if he had done the right thing by accepting this offer. One evening, Emily was invited to a party at a friend's house. When she got there, she saw couples everywhere, laughing, dancing, and enjoying each other's company. She couldn't help but feel a sharp pain of jealousy in her heart. When she got back home that night, all alone, she broke down and cried. She kept asking herself if Jacob still cared for her as deeply as he did before. Meanwhile, Jacob was facing a serious crisis at work. He had to work late nights and weekends to solve the problem. This meant he had even less time to talk to Emily. The lack of communication added a lot to his anxiety. He started to worry that Emily might lose patience and stop waiting for him. During a brief phone call one day, all their hidden insecurities came out. Emily got angry at Jacob and shouted at him for not being there for her emotionally when she needed him. Jacob, feeling stressed and misunderstood, shouted back and said that he was doing the best he could in such difficult circumstances. After the call ended, both of them felt a deep sense of dread. They were both afraid that their love was slowly disappearing. They wondered if the doubts and fears were too big for them to overcome. Chapter 10. Love Triumphs. Even in the middle of all these doubts and fears, Emily and Jacob decided that they couldn't just let their relationship fall apart. They both understood that the love they shared was too precious to give up on. Emily made a big effort to focus on her art and on growing as a person. She signed up for art workshops and met lots of new people. But no matter what she was doing, Jacob was always in her heart and mind. Jacob, too, found ways to handle his work better. He made sure to create more time for Emily. He would send her sweet letters telling her how much he missed her and small gifts to show his love. One day, out of the blue, Jacob showed up at Emily's doorstep. The look of pure joy and disbelief on Emily's face was something you couldn't put a price on. They spent the next few days together, just like in the old times. They talked for hours, laughed until their stomachs hurt, and managed to rekindle the strong love they once had. From that moment on, they both knew for sure that no matter what challenges life threw at them, their love would always come out on top. They decided to make more and more efforts to be a part of each other's lives. Whether it was by visiting each other often or finding a way to be together all the time, they were determined to make it work. In the end, their love proved to be stronger than the distance that separated them and the doubts and fears that tried to break them apart. They came out of this difficult period more committed to each other and more in love than ever before. They were ready to face whatever the future had in store for them as long as they were together.